Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful. In the first session, we had a brief review of the historical background of Islam and then the life of the Prophet. And we saw how Islam started as revelation came to the Prophet Muhammad in the year 610 after Hijrah. So after that, for 13 years, he was in Mecca, and then for 10 years, he was in Medina. So altogether, he lived 63 years. And in this session, I want to talk about the sources for understanding Islam and some doctrines and practices and also moral teachings of Islam. So I have to be very brief and fast. The first source for understanding Islam is the Quran. So the Quran is the book which was revealed over a period of 23 years to the Prophet. There was a gap of 3 years, and so from the beginning to the end took 23 years, but actually revelation used to come in 20 years. Some of the chapters of the Quran are revealed in Mecca, and some are revealed in Medina. But the way the Quran is put together is not according to the chronological order. So it's not that the first chapter that you have in the Quran right now was revealed first, and then the second chapter. The Quran is not according to the chronological order put together. It is put together in the way that we have first the opening of chapter Al-Hamd, the praise, which is like a preface to the Quran. It's called Fatihatul Kitab. It's the beginning of the Quran. It has ideas similar to the prayer of Father in Heaven in Christianity. And somehow it's like a brief manifesto of Islam. Then we have the longest chapters of the Quran. So second chapter is the most longest chapter. Then we have third chapter, which is the second longest. So we have the longest, and then we move on to the middle and then short chapters of the Quran. There is a discussion among Muslim scholars who put the Quran into this order. There are differences of opinions across different schools of Islam. So it's not necessarily that every person from this, for example, denomination of Islam should believe in this. Many scholars believe that this order comes from the Prophet, or at least which verses belong to which chapter and the name of the chapter are decided by the Prophet. This is a technical discussion. What is important is that all Muslims believe from cover to cover it's literally revealed to the Prophet. Literally. So it means that every word is word of God. And Muslims believe that no alteration, no change, whether it be addition or deletion, has happened to the Quran. So the whole book is revealed, but in different pieces. If Quran is translated into another language, it is not considered by Muslims as the Quran. So if it's translated into even a close language or a far language, it is, for example, if it is translated to Persian or Hebrew or English or Chinese, it's not the Quran. even if it is rewritten in Arabic, it is not the Quran. The Quran is only the actual wording that was revealed to the Prophet. Anything else becomes translation, interpretation, but the Quran has to be the original one. And this is why Muslims in their prayer, they recite the Quran and the main invocations also in Arabic. And the Quran is also made in the way that is possible to recite it in different tones, and also it's easy to remember. So we have many people who have memorized the whole Quran. So we have many what we call huffaz or memorizers of the Quran. So this is the most important source. The question with the Quran for Muslims is more a matter of interpretation, because they don't disagree on the text, but there are lots of differences in interpretation, especially with respect to the verses of the Quran that the Quran itself calls mutashabihat, because the Quran says the verses of the Quran are divided into two parts. منه آيات محكمات هن الكتاب وأخر متشابهات. Some verses of the Quran are explicit. They can only be understood in one way. These are called muhkamat. These are those verses whose meanings are very clear and firm, and these are called Kitab, the main or the mother of the book. And there are verses that have to be interpreted in the light of the first group of verses. So in this second category, we may have different interpretations. Like other religions, the interpretations sometimes have varied very much. For example, there was an issue in early history of science of kalam or theology, and still some people may have this idea that that God can be visible or not. And there were people like Ash'arites who had the idea that God is visible. You can see God by physical eyes. Some said, not in this world, but in the hereafter, you can see God by physical eyes. Many other theologians, like Mu'tazilites and Shiites, they had the idea that we can never see God by physical eyes, because something to be seen by physical eyes has to be physical and material, has to have limit, has to occupy space. God cannot be seen by physical eyes. But both groups argued from the Quran. In addition to bringing intellectual arguments, both groups, for the same idea, argued from the Quran. So sometimes you have, even in other traditions, other religions, for example, two denominations in Christianity, they may have disagreement, and they both argue from the scripture. So in Islam also the same. So both groups argued from the Quran, and interestingly, in one case, both of them argued from the same verse. There is a verse about Moses asking God to see him, because the Quran tells us that some of the Israelites used to ask Moses to show them God. And they said, لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكَ حَتَّى نَرَى اللَّهَ جَهْرَةً. We are not going to believe unless you show us God clearly. We have to see God. So Moses knew that this is not possible, but still he conveyed the message to God and said, رَبِّ أَرْنِي أَنْظُرْ إِلَيْكَ. My Lord, show yourself to me so that I can look at you. And God said, إِنَّكَ لَن تَرَانِي يَا مُوسَى. You can never see me. وَلَكِنْ انظُرْ إِلَى الْجَبَلِ فَإِنْ اسْتَقَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي. But look at this mount. If this mount remains intact, you can see me. فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ جَعَلَهُ دَكًّا. God made a manifestation to the mount, and mount was exploded. وَخَرَّ مُوسَى صَعِقًا. And Musa fell down screaming. So this showed that it's not possible to see God. But those people who were insisting that God is visible said, look, Moses asked God to show him himself. If this was not possible, Moses would not have asked him. So they argue from the same verse that it's possible to see God. But God said, you cannot see me, means you cannot see me in this world. But you can see me in the hereafter. So what I want to bring to your attention is that when it comes to interpretation of the Quran, Muslims have different opinions. And you should not think that all Muslims think the same. And there is a monolithic interpretation of the Quran. So you can find people who come with very extreme understanding of the Quran, and they may become very radical and fanatic, and you may find greatest majority of Muslims would not agree with them with this interpretation. So this is something which is very much possible. In any case, the Quran is 114 chapters, which are different in size, as I mentioned. Altogether, there are more than 6,000 verses. There is a difference in counting. So some say 6,666, but that may not be very accurate according to some counting. In any way, it's more than 6,200 verses and 114 chapters. All the chapters of the Quran start with a similar phrase, and that is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, who is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Some people translate the compassionate, the merciful, the most compassionate, the most merciful. But if you want to have a better understanding, more accurate understanding, Ar-Rahman is a name of God which indicates inclusive mercy of God. So when we want to say God has mercy for all creatures, human beings, animals, plants, everything, we use Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahim is used to refer to the mercy of God for believers. So God has inclusive mercy for everyone and has extra mercy for the believers. So he has two types of mercy. One which is given free to everyone. Every creature has mercy of God. Every creature is loved by God. But you can qualify yourself and then receive more mercy from God. Like a teacher who is available for all students, but if there are students who want to learn more and show appreciation even over break or outside the school, the teacher can help them, give them more material, more ideas, help them. Even after they finish the school, the teacher can still help them. It's not that the teacher only cares for these people, but he has additional care for these people. So all the chapters of the Quran start with this, except chapter 9. Chapter 9 does not start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. But in another chapter, which is chapter An-Naml, the ant, we have Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the middle. So it makes again the number of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim equal to the number of the chapters. According to Shia scholars, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is part of every chapter apart from chapter 9. It means that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is revealed again and again at the beginning of each chapter. according to majority of Sunni scholars, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim belongs to the first chapter, and then Muslims put it later. It's like, they copy-pasted Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the beginning of each chapter. But according to Shia, no, it was revealed and it's part of each chapter. Therefore, in prayer, the Shia Muslims start recitation of the first chapter, another chapter with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, but some non-Shia or majority of non-Shia, they don't say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim for some recitations. In any case, what is important, and I particularly mention this, is to know that the Quran is a book of mercy. Why God, among all his names, he keeps telling us in the name of God, who is all merciful and who is additionally merciful to the good people. Why? Why God so much repeats this to us? Because God wants us to have this image of him. I have some papers on God's mercy. If you are interested, I have 8 papers on understanding God's mercy according to the Quran. And we have examined different aspects of God's mercy. And one of the things which is interesting is we made a survey of all the names and attributes of God in the Quran. And then we compared the frequency. Mercy, by far, is the most frequently mentioned quality of God in the Quran. We have about 600 cases that an adjective or a name from mercy is used for God. And then comes later knowledge of God. So mercy of God is very, very important concept in the Quran. And in these papers, I have tried to give a whole system of theology and morality based on mercy from the Quran. The Quran also says that not only God is merciful, it says that the Quran is a book also for healing and mercy. نُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ. We send through the Quran healing and mercy. And also, as you know, the Prophet also is sent as mercy for all people. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So, it is very sad to see that this book of mercy from God who is merciful and is declared by the Prophet who is mercy for mankind is interpreted by people who have no mercy. It's very heartbreaking. How something which is supposed to be prescription for mercy is used as instruction for cruelty. But as I said, interpretations can be different. And of course, sometimes also there is no sincerity. So sometimes sincere people make mistake in understanding, and sometimes there is no sincerity at all. It makes it even worse. But you have to be careful. If you want to understand the Quran, don't look at this person or that person, because these people may have misunderstood totally the Quran. It's possible. So you have to refer to the Quran. You have to study different interpretations and compare and see which one seems to make more sense and is more compatible with the Quran. The second source for understanding Islam is what we call Sunnah, which is the sayings or deeds or tacit approval of the Prophet, taqrir. Sometimes we have hadith that Prophet said this or that. Sometimes we have something about his practice. Sometimes we know that something was done in the presence of the Prophet and the Prophet didn't object. This is called It means that it was okay. So Sunnah comes in three forms: sayings, deeds, and tacit approval. But most of the Sunnah that we have is about his sayings and deeds. So, according to Quran, the Prophet is a role model. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. So he is a good example and role model for us, therefore we should follow him. According to Quran, the Prophet is also teacher of the Quran. يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And he is also interpreter of the Quran. لِتُبَيَّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. So he's a role model, he's a teacher, and he is interpreter of the Quran. Plus, he is the one who is supposed to implement the Quran. لِتَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. So, for this reason, the Prophet occupies a very central position for us. So if you want to understand the Quran, if you want to know how to implement the Quran, how to practice the Quran, we should refer to the Prophet. Then, a question, a very important question, emerged. Who is going to succeed the Prophet? This question was there in minds of people when the Prophet was alive. As any leader who starts something, people always wonder what is going to happen after this leader. This question was in minds of people. The Shia believe that God had already decided who would be the successor to the Prophet. And on different occasions, the Prophet declared this to people. And in one particular occasion, in his final pilgrimage to Mecca, on the way back, he actually declared this to thousands of people, and they paid allegiance. So he died while this was already made clear. According to Sunni Muslims, the Prophet did not make any decision, did not declare any decision of God. He died without touching this issue. So this is a central difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims. So the Shia say this was decided by God. The Prophet already mentioned this a few times, and the major incident was on the day of Qadir, the 18th of Dhul Hajjah, in the last Hajj, when he said this in front of thousands of people. Sunni Muslims say the Prophet didn't say anything about this, God didn't make any decision, and it was left to people to decide. So, this is a very important question, because this started two major branches in Islam. It's not like, for example, Reformation, which took place 500 years ago, which means after 1500 years of Jesus. Or it's not like the split between the Roman Catholic Church and Orthodox Church. This goes back to the very beginning of Islam. Okay, so it's the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims in this regard is very historical. And it is very sad to see that how some people, even today, they struggle to recognize this diversity. And they think, by, for example, killing or forcing, they can make Islam one branch. From the beginning, Islam has two branches. And most of the time, they had very peaceful relation. And still, in most of the part, they have peaceful relation. But unfortunately, sometimes there have been extremists who try to cause tension. So, this historical issue has some theological implications. So we are not talking about something that what should be done or what should have been done in that time. The question is more important than just being a historical question. The question is, how do you understand Islam in the years to come after the Prophet? Who is going to fill the gap? No revelation is coming because Prophet was the last prophet. But who is going to interpret the Quran after the Prophet for us? Who is going to tell us what should we do in new emerging questions? So, Shia believe that they should refer to the household of the Prophet and to the Imams. Sunni Muslims believe that what they have received from the Prophet and the companions of the Prophet, including the household of the Prophet, so they respect household of the Prophet as companions of the Prophet, as they love them, but they don't give them a special significant position in continuing teaching of Islam. So they say, we refer to these sources that we have, and if we have any gap, if there is any issue that we don't have specifically anything from Quran or Hadith, we have to have methods for filling the gap. I don't want to go into these technical issues, for example, about, qiyas, which is a kind of approach that when you know the ruling for something and there is something similar to it for which you don't have guidance, you try to extend the ruling for this to the other case. So this is something that they used to do, or for istihsan or masalim. So there are different methods that they try to use to fill the gap. But the Shia believe that it is already decided by God. So we refer to imams. Imam here is different from, we say, who is imam of this mosque? Imam of the mosque means the leader of the congregational prayer in this mosque. Imam, in the sense that we say Shia have 12 imams, means a divinely appointed leader. A divinely appointed leader who succeeds the Prophet. So, for the Shia Muslims, then the sayings and practice of imams are also important for understanding Islam. So you should understand then this difference between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims. And then there is a discussion about reason, intellect. Some Muslims believe that reason or intellect is only good in theology but not in law or morality. Some Muslims say no, even in law and morality we should follow reason. And there were lots of discussion about the role of reason in religion. And Shia Muslims believe that reason is one of the ways that God has communicated His will to us, and we should follow reason. And there is no contradiction between reason and revelation. There is absolute harmony between reason and revelation. They don't contradict. They also don't replace each other. They supplement each other. There are issues that you can understand by your intellect. There are issues you can understand through revelation. And there are issues that you can understand by both. So they supplement each other, but never contradict each other. This is about the sources of Islam. Now, based on these sources, let us see what are the doctrines of Islam. The major doctrines of Islam are unity of God in the first place. So not only God exists, but God has also certain qualities. And you find these qualities, for the most part, common in other Abrahamic religions. For example, God is one. All Abrahamic religions believe that God is one. Some Muslims think that Christianity is an exception because Christianity, they believe in Trinity. But the truth is that even Christians believe in one God. But their understanding of this God is Trinitarian. Otherwise, not that they say we have three gods. God, the Father, is the one. God, the Creator, is one. But the way they understand unity of God is in Trinitarian form. So, whether it be Christians or Muslims or Jews, they believe in one God who created the world, who is the Lord and sustainer of the world. God is all-powerful. He is capable of doing everything possible. God knows everything. God is benevolent. He has good will, good wish for all of us. And God is living. Again, all Abrahamic religions believe that God has life. God, in Arabic we say hayy. God is living. God is not dead. Even God does not sleep or take nap. God is fully alive, fully understanding, fully attending. But among all the attributes of God, unity of God is the most central point in the Quran. Because most of people, they believe in God, but they have false image of God. Idol worshippers, pagans, even they believed in God. But unfortunately, they associated partners to God. And they believed that, for example, if you want to get closer to God, the Creator, you have to worship these idols. You have to offer some gifts to these idols, so some sacrifice to get closer to God. If you want rain, for example, this idol, you have to please this idol to get rain. If you want child, that idol, can help you with children. So they had this polytheistic understanding of God. Otherwise, they didn't deny existence of God. The Quran says, if you ask these pagans, لَإِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. If you ask them, who created the skies and the earth? They would not say these idols. لَيَقُولُنَّ خَلَقَهُنَّ اللَّهِ. They say, no, God created them. So they had faith in God, but they suffered misunderstanding, misconceptions. And one of the main misunderstandings was shirk, polytheism. So the Quran emphasizes a lot on unity of God. And we believe that unity of God can form and shape every aspect of our faith. I will give you a copy of my recent book, Unity of God and Unity in God. In the first part, you would see references to what Muslim philosophers, Muslim mystics, Muslim ethicists have said about unity of God. So if you believe in one God as the source of all good things and the source of beauty, and you feel that He is the only provider of all good things, you would not become jealous, you would not become greedy, you would not be hurting other people, you would not try to, kill other people, fight people. Why you are doing these things? There is one source of good who has unlimited treasure, and He is open to all of us. We don't need, to go to the black market or to cheat. There is enough of legitimate supply for all of us. Another doctrine which is very important is prophethood. Muslims believe, again like other Abrahamic religions, that God has spoken to us. God has revealed to us. God has chosen some of human beings who were pious and revealed to them so that they relay to us the words of God. Of course, in Christianity there is a difference. In Christianity they believe that up to Jesus it was God revealing to the prophets. But now there is a new era, and God has revealed Himself by sending His Son Jesus. So the Word is now made flesh. So we don't have a book revealed to prophet. We have God revealing Himself in the form of Jesus. But even Christianity believes that before Jesus there were revelations and books and prophets. But they don't believe that Jesus is a prophet, like Muslims who believe that Jesus was a prophet. So there is such difference, but we all accept that we are in need of God's revelation. It helps us in understanding things that we cannot understand by ourselves, and also correct our mistakes, plus gives us more determination to follow what we can understand. If you can understand yourself, that for example, you have to keep your promise. You understand it by your conscience. But also a scripture tells us that you have to keep your promise. This gives you extra reason and provides you with sanction for being very careful about this issue. So Muslims believe in prophethood, in need for revelation, in need for referring to the scripture and trying to live according to the norms that we receive from revelation. As I said in the first session, the Quran doesn't give us a specific number of the prophets. The Quran mentions some prophets by names and says there are many that we have not mentioned their stories. In Hadith, we find that there were 124,000 prophets. What the Quran tells us is that God has dispatched messengers to all nations. لَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. So we should not think that the prophets were only sent to Middle East. Although the prophets that we know mostly, like Prophet Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, Joseph, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, they are all from Middle East. Yeah? But the Quran says we have dispatched messengers to all nations. لَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. And the message in essence was the same. أَنْ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. To serve God and avoid following the evil. So, this is about the idea of revelation, prophethood. We don't know how many books were revealed, because it's not that every prophet brought a book. We know there were books. How many, we don't know. But those books which are mentioned in the Quran is the Quran itself, which has different names. Injil, which is Gospel. Torah, Book of Abraham, and Psalms of David. These are mentioned in the Quran. But there can be much more which are not mentioned. The other major doctrine is resurrection. We all, like other Abrahamic religions, believe that death is not end of human life. Death marks transition from this world to another world, and we would have another form of life. There would be a gap till all human beings will be resurrected together. So it's not that when you die, then quickly you go to the day of judgment. You have to wait till other people, other generations also join. So there would be one call after which everything which is alive would die, and then a second call, then everyone is resurrected. So when we are resurrected, we would be judged. According to some hadiths, even when we die, some major questions will be asked. But detailed questioning will take place on the day of judgment. And we have to be accountable about everything we have done, everything we have said. So this sense of accountability is very important in life of believers, that you have to be careful, even if no one is watching you and no one is going to know about this. You should always do good things, intend good things, say good things, wish good things. And the Quran says, even if it is a slightest particle, very, very little thing, it will be brought. If you have done very little good, you will see it. If you have done very little bad, you will see it. So, day of judgment is for all human beings, and we will be judged based on what is the judgment. Then we would be either given entrance to heaven, or might be going to hell, or might be in between. We have also this mentioned that there are people who are not good enough to go to heaven, but for some good qualities that they had, they would not also be sent to hell. And also, two important things function on the day of judgment. One is justice of God. No one would be dealt with injustice. Never, ever any injustice would be done. Secondly, mercy of God would be the main factor. So justice of God is the foundation, and on top of that, mercy of God. We have a hadith that mercy of God has 100 parts. Only one part has been exhibited in this world. So everything that we see, creation, guidance, health, parents, children, good friends, food, everything that we have, health, success, is only 1% of the mercy of God. 99% is preserved for the hereafter. So this is very, promising. There are other doctrines of Islam, and in particular, I want to say one doctrine which is common between Sunni and Shia, although for the Shia is more significant. And this is doctrine of Al-Mahdi. Yes. So, all Muslims, no matter which school of Islam, they have tens of hadiths from the Prophet that there would be a person from progeny of Prophet, and in some hadith says progeny of Lady Fatima, and in some say progeny of Imam Hussein. So these are all narrated by Sunni Shia. God would have a leader for humanity called Al-Mahdi, means the guided, who would fill the earth with justice and equity. يَمْلَأُ اللَّهُ بِهِ الْأَرْضَ قِسْطًا وَعَدْلًا بَعْدَمَا مُلِئَتْ ظُلْمًا وَجَوْرًا. All Muslims have this. No one doubts this. There are differences between Sunni and Shia in details. For example, majority of Sunni Muslims believe that he is not yet born. Majority, not all. Actually, there were people in the history in the Sunni world that claimed, or for them, the claim was made that they were Mahdi. But then people realized that they were not Mahdi because they didn't achieve this. But they were people that some people thought they are Mahdi. But majority say he is not yet born. Majority of Shia, or if you speak about the 12ers, because the majority of the Shia are 12ers today, the 12ers say Imam Mahdi is born, and he is the son of the 11th Imam. So, according to the 12ers, which is the majority of the Shia today in the world, like more than 90% of the Shia Muslims, in the year 255 after Hijrah, okay? You remember we said in the first session, what is the beginning of Islamic calendar?
500
No.
The beginning is when the Prophet moved to the...
The beginning is migration to Medina. Yes? That is 13 years after Islam already started.
Okay.
Yeah? So, it is then 53 years after 570. Because the Prophet was born in 570. In 610, he was receiving the first revelation. In 623, he migrated. So, this is the beginning of Islamic calendar. So, in 255 of Islamic calendar, Imam Mahdi was born in a city which is known as Samarra. Today, the city is in Iraq and is a place of pilgrimage. In 260, his father was killed and the occultation started. We say al-ghayba. It means that from that time, he was not meeting people, he was not introducing himself to people, and up to 329, for 69 years, at each time there was one person who was facilitating contacts with him. These are called deputies, and Nawabul Arba. There were 4 people, but at each time one person who was acting as a medium between Imam and the community. And in 329, this stopped and the second phase started, which is called Al-Ghaybatul Kubra. Major occultation started. So this is for Shia Muslims who believe that Imam Mahdi is born and he is in the state of occultation. Means he is alive, he goes around, but people don't know who he is. Okay?
The same person.
The same person. Even we have hadith that every Hajj, every season of pilgrimage to Mecca, he goes there. People may see him, but they don't know who he is. But what Sunni and Shia both have in their sayings of Prophet, in the collections of sayings of the Prophet, is that in end of time, when Mahdi introduces himself and starts the movement by the command of God, Jesus also would join him. It's very important. According to the Quran, Jesus is raised by God. God says to Jesus, إِنِّي مُتَوَفِّيكَ وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيَّ. I am going to take you and raise you towards myself. So Jesus, according to Quran, was raised by God. He's alive. When end of time comes and Imam Mahdi introduces himself and starts the process of bringing social justice everywhere, Jesus descends. Hadith says, Nazala ibn Maryam, the son of Lady Mary, descends because he has been raised. So Jesus and Imam Mahdi would be together in end of time for establishing universal justice with the help of people. People should make the main part, because the Quran says all the messengers come from God so that people establish social justice. لقد أرسلنا رسلنا بالبينات وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط. Messengers didn't come to establish justice by their own hands or miracles. All have come to show humanity so that humanity would establish justice. So far, humanity has never had this courage and determination and unity to establish social justice. But when Jesus and Imam Mahdi come, then that's the time that humanity under their leadership would establish equity and social justice everywhere in the world. So we can have local just governments, but universal justice, even to the extent that no one would do any injustice even to animals. This will be established before this world ends. This world would not end unless universal justice and solidarity and peace would be established. Yes.
Sheikh, nowadays we always see this sentence.
Could you just wait 10 minutes, I finish, and then I take questions. So this is the idea of Al-Mahdi, and it is very inspiring for me, because when I see that Jesus and Imam Mahdi are going to come together, and also Imam Mahdi from his mother's side has connection to St. Peter, according to some historical sources. But in addition to that, what is very obvious is Jesus and Imam Mahdi come together. What does it say to us? Why among all people Jesus is raised by God and is going to be sent back? And why he is with Imam Mahdi? For me, this is a sign that Muslims and Christians should come together, and they would finally come together and work together, but we should pave the way for that. We should prepare for that. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense why these two people are going to lead humanity. Among practices, because time is very short, I want to say something about practices. So we mentioned some of the major doctrine, some of the major practices. One is daily prayer, what we call salat, or in Farsi and Urdu we say namaz. Every Muslim says 5 prayer every day. Unless, for example, women, when they have their period, they may not say the prayer. But otherwise, everyone is supposed to say prayer 5 times a day. One is early morning, after dawn. One is in the middle of the day, when sun is in the middle of the sky and a little bit moving towards the west. One is in the afternoon. One is when sun sets, and one is sometime after sun sets, when the redness disappears completely. So we have 5 prayers. These prayers are made by units, rak'ah. Okay? Each prayer has one particular pattern which is repeated. For example, the morning prayer has 2 units, 2 rak'ah. Zohr, midday prayer, has 4 rak'ah. Asr, or afternoon, has 4. Maghrib, 3. Isha, 4. What does it mean? It means that you have some recitation, then you bend, then you go for prostration. When you stand up, then this is the second unit. So if you see Muslim saying prayer, you see first they start with standing, then they bend, then they stand up and they go for prostration. They do 2 prostration, and then they stand up. So each standing and bending and 2 prostration is 1 rak'ah. It doesn't take that long, it can take 1 minute for each rak'ah. So maybe 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. But if you want to take your time and recite more or have more contemplation, so it can be longer. Each prayer needs some preparation. Our body must be clean. Our dress must be clean. Also, nothing that does not belong to me should be on me. So I cannot take someone else's dress or money and buy a dress and say my prayer. It should be totally mine, legally mine, and clean and pure. Also, the place that I say my prayer must be clean and something that I have permission to use. I cannot enter someone else's land or house and say my prayer there. It has to be permissible for me to use. And normally we also try to do it together. It's highly recommended to pray together in the form of congregational prayers, jama'ah. So it's a way of bringing also people together. You can say your prayer everywhere, which is permissible and clean, but it's better to say it in a mosque or in a place which is prepared for prayer. There is more peace and it's more quiet. Before prayer also we make ablution. So that is one of the requirements of prayer. The other important practice is fasting. You all know that in the months of Ramadan, Muslims fast. From dawn till sunset, they should not eat or drink or do certain things. Of course, this is for people who are healthy, who are able to do this. If someone cannot do it, so they don't do it. But if someone is able to do it, they do this, and this is very strong and powerful spiritual exercise. And after 1 month of doing this, not only physically you are more fit, but spiritually you feel more empowered because you have been able to resist against your desires and against temptations for eating and drinking and other things that by themselves are okay, but you try not to do these things, like sports people who try to be very careful about their diet because they want to be able to function at a high level. So fasting is not only physically but spiritually very important, and also it is a way for us to experience what poor people go through. When you don't eat, when you don't drink, you better understand the situation of people who cannot afford to eat or who cannot have water to drink. Then we have pilgrimage to Mecca. We call it Hajj. So if you are healthy and well off and there is security, once in your life you should go to Mecca. As a Muslim, once in your life you go to Mecca, and there is a season for it, which is the 12th month of Islamic calendar, in the month of Dhul Hajj. There are few days that you have to be there. And most of Hajj is reconstruction of some of the things that Abraham and Hagar and Ishmael were related and involved. So we go to remind ourselves of the struggle of Abraham and the family of Abraham to follow the will of God and resist against Satan. Hajj is very, a special experience. It's very difficult to explain. But when you go there, it's very difficult, but you want to go again and again. Those who have not been to Hajj, it's easier for them not to go. Those who go there, then they want to go again and again. Because you go there and you are with millions of people, all dressed the same, all do the same thing, and everyone is equal. And everyone is focused on spirituality. Poor and rich, kings and ordinary people, all are together. It's very special experience. We have also zakat. That is the charity that we have to pay. There are obligatory charity that we have as Muslims to pay, and there are also recommended. You can always give more and more, but there is a minimum that every Muslim has to pay. And there are also other issues, but because my time is very short, so I just go to the morals. With respect to morals, inshallah you will find practices and morals and doctrines in the book that I'm going to give you. So if anything I'm missing because of time, then you can follow up there. And there are more detailed books also. With respect to morals, you must know that although we have doctrines and we have practices, but the main part of the message of the Prophet was the moral part. In a famous hadith, the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent by God to accomplish noble traits of character. So this message is mostly moral message, a spiritual message. The Prophet did not come just to teach us some doctrines to believe in or do some actions. The Prophet came to purify us. The Quran says in 4 places that one of the main tasks of the Prophet was tazkiyah, to purify. يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Teaching the book and wisdom was part of it. But another important point was يُزَكِّيهِمْ, to purify. We have to purify our heart because we are moving towards God. God is the purest of the pure. When you move towards God, you should also try to purify yourselves. Any attachment to worldly things, like for example, if I am very attached to money or fame or power or position or publicity, these are impurities in my heart. I should only have desire for God, and through God, desire for good things. Love for everyone. But if there is anything selfish, anything satanic, anything which is worldly in the sense that we use, this is a sign of impurity. So the message is a message for bringing purity. In the book, as you see, I mentioned a way of classifying moral values which involves 4 relations. So we can classify moral values of Islam into 4 categories. And you would find perhaps, if not 100%, at least 99% the same in other Abrahamic religions. Emphasis can be different, but everything is common. For example, what virtues we should observe with respect to ourselves. This is one category. For example, we should be trying to be rational. We should try to be balanced. We should try to be contemplative. We should try to learn. These are the things that we have to observe with respect to ourselves. What should we observe with respect to our relation with God? Serving God, repentance, trusting in God. These are things that relate to our relation with God. What we should observe with relation to each other, other people. A very important part of Islam can be seen in the way people should relate to each other and interact with each other. I cannot be a good Muslim and just worship God. The sign of a good Muslim is that first, he would not hurt other people and everyone is safe, but plus he goes and helps them. Love for God comes with love for people for the sake of God. These are very closely connected. You cannot love God and say, I love God, but I don't bother about people. It's impossible. If you love God, you love people. You love even animals. You cannot even hurt animals or plants or waste water or pollute, for example, air if you love God. If you love God, you should only try to be respectful to creatures of God and love them and help them. Then we have relation with rest of creation. So relation with yourself, relation with God, relation with people, relation with rest of the creation. And for each of them, there are different values that we should observe. But because I want to listen to your questions and time is very short, so I stop here, and I thank God that I had this blessing of being with you and discuss together these issues, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.